Cassidy's our next speaker, obviously. Cassidy's senior in the environmental biology program, and I'm gonna mute, and you go right ahead.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. I did my study on surface water phosphorus loads to Cazenovia Lake. First, I want to talk about like why it's important to study phosphorus load. Often in the summer, we'll hear like, say, a lake local to us gets closed because of algal blooms. In 2019, the DEC recorded 1,138 blooms in New York State alone. Harmful algal blooms, which is also referred to as HABs, occur when cyanobacteria overproduces, and it will cover the surface. You'll see like, I have a picture after the slide actually that shows like, it'll be like a blue or green, which is usually what we have is the blue-green algae. Looks disgusting. It decreases dissolved oxygen and it can cause the water to be toxic. They usually need, the main things to occur are sunlight, slow-moving water, and enough nutrients. And two of the most common access nutrients we find are nitrogen and phosphorus, but I'm just looking at phosphorus here. And there also is a positive correlation between the phosphorus loads and algal bloom frequency and intensity. I tried to find a graph to illustrate that, but I wasn't able to. Of course, there's supposed to be two pictures here. It was showing earlier, but that's just the color of the water that could appear from an algal bloom. And so next, how would phosphorus get into our water? So most commonly, it's human activities. So like farms using fertilizers, which are obviously nutrients to make their products grow faster. Also sewage and most recently discovered septic tanks as well. So for septic tanks, they obviously clean out like the pathogens from our waste, but they don't have anything in place for most septic tanks to deal with the nutrients that are being put out. So as the septic tank runs through, it will clean out the pathogens and such, but once it like gets released into the ground, it there's nothing in place for the nutrients. Illegal dumping as well. So obviously if say there's plants or factories, anything like farms that are dumping things in places that they're not supposed to, and obviously like urbanization causes like more pollution, but even just in the aspect of just having more roads and sidewalks, that's more flat surfaces that the water can run on, as well as the water isn't being absorbed as it could be if it was like on regular ground. So like a simple rainfall can like wash any like nutrients or anything into lakes and streams. So in particular, I'm studying Cazenovia Lake to potentially help reduce like algal blooms. So Cazenovia Lake is used for things such as like mostly recreational things such as like fishing, swimming, boating. There's also parks. And during the winter, the north end of the lake is pretty popular for ice fishing. If you're ever driving by, you can see a lot of people on the lake ice fishing as well. But when there's an algae bloom, it can inhibit contact with the lake, so we wouldn't be able to swim like you here in the summer. And I also read on the World Health Organization that you should try to like avoid eating fish that are in a lake that has a current bloom because it could have toxins in it. So in order to find the problem of phosphorus entering the lake, a way to do that would be sampling tributaries of the lakes to get the flow rate and phosphorus concentration. This data will show where the phosphorus is entering the lake, and the results potentially can be used to lower the phosphorus load. It's important to recognize that the phosphorus concentration and the phosphorus load are different. The phosphorus load is actually the flow rate and phosphorus concentration multiplied, which I explain more. So the study site, as I mentioned before, is Cazenovia Lake. The tributary study were culverts and drains. Culverts are like pipeways that carry water. I have pictures to illustrate it better. These sites were actually studied by Dr. himself and his family as well. He wasn't able to get directly onto like the tributary connecting directly to the lake in most cases because of private property issues, obviously, but would try to get as close as possible. And there were 45 sites in total. Here is a site map. It just shows they aren't like individually labeled, but it just shows around the whole lake where the sites were taken. And these are just images of sites. So in the upper right-hand corner, that would be a culvert, so like a pipe carrying water. And then the bottom right picture, I don't know if it's clear enough to see, but on the right there is a road like right next to where this water is. So it's just interesting to show that whatever is probably on that road is going right into that waterway as well. So he did this for 36 months, once a month. So each month he would go out there and he would get a grab sample of 125 milliliters of water, and that was used for the phosphorus testing. So that was sent to a different lab, and the water was preserved before being sent with 1 milliliter of 2.36 moles of sulfuric acid. And then also he collected data to calculate the flow rates there as well. And this occurred from June 28, 2016 to May 31st, 2019. These are just images to show the phosphorus that's getting sent to the phosphorus lab to get tested on. In the first picture on the left, you can see in the bigger, it's being preserved with the sulfuric acid, and on the right, it's just packaged to be sent to the lab. This picture is a little blurry, but it just shows 45 bottles for the 45 sites, and they're all labeled individually. Things that say like C1 or C2, the C stands for culvert, and then the S would stand for stream. So for the flow rate aspect of the study, a flow meter was occasionally used, not in most cases though. The two main ways were either measurements of sediment moving down the stream. So say you could see like moving up the sediment, kicking up the sediment, you can measure it from like a distance and time it to see how long it takes to get to a certain distance down the stream, and that was measured in meters per second. Or you could use a bucket, which would be filled with water flowing. So I have a picture and a video to illustrate this, but if there was, say, a culvert that was like almost looked like a tiny little waterfall that you could actually put the bucket right under, and you would just time it as it filled. So that was measured in liters per second. Sometimes the site could be dried out, and it was obviously just recorded as 0. In the winter, it could, like, the surface of the water could be frozen, but if you just broke through the surface, you could reach the flowing water. But there also could be waters that were full, but it was standing still, and that was also a flow rate of 0. And hopefully the video works. This is a video of Dr. York's actually measuring, as I was trying to explain, with the bucket, so a flow rate.
Flow of about 4 liters in 20 seconds, or 12 liters per minute.
Okay. These were also just images of culverts. So on the right, this would be like an example of a culvert that you can measure with a bucket. And also on the left, just showing in the winter how the culverts could look. So as I was mentioning before, the phosphorus, so the grab samples were sent to Sunioniana Biological Field Station, and they were tested for total phosphorus concentration there. A chain of custody form was used, and that just basically maintains organization, so it tells you exactly what you need to be tested, like what you need these samples to be tested for, the date, etc. And the total phosphorus was measured by the standard procedure to measure phosphorus. And same thing with laboratory procedures, just to make sure that things weren't contaminated. And then, as I mentioned before, so the total phosphorus concentration was then multiplied by the flow rate to get the phosphorus load. So this is a little blurry, but so for the first thing I looked at was the flow rates just in general. So I averaged each site's flow rates over the 36 months, and that was in liters per minute. And I just did the top 10 out of the 45. I found that So Stream 6, which is on North Lake Road, had way much more water flowing than any of the other streams. And just to illustrate where it is, this is the uppermost northern end of Cazenovia Lake, and I think you can see my cursor, but if not, right below the red dot, so to the right of it and a tiny bit south, is where this measurement was taken, and you can see like how far this water can go up. So it is a really big stream. It's also important to know that even though like my purpose of this was to get the phosphorus load, the flow rate in general is just a good value to have, because knowing that like a stream is contributing a lot of water to the lake, you might want to already, not even just for phosphorus, but for anything, like anything toxic that can get into this stream flow or any sort of pollution, can do more damage than like a stream flow that is almost like negligible. So you might want to like always try to preserve and make sure that this stream is healthy. Next was the average phosphorus concentration for each tributary. So I did the same thing here. The lab sent everything back in micrograms per liter. So I'm sorry, my dog is barking. S9 was the one that had the highest. It was a little over 100, and let me go to it. Oh, there it goes. So it was right about here, if you can see my cursor, where 92 and 20 meet, and a little bit south to that. So this is the road that actually like brings you to Syracuse, if that makes it easier to like illustrate where it is. It's at the south end, so kind of this is like a big hill that comes down. So if anything, I was thinking maybe the phosphorus concentration could be higher here, just because it's in like the dip of hills. So anything that's coming will run down to this particular spot. The second highest concentration for phosphorus was on Westlake Road. And I also just did an illustration to show that it could be because there are a bunch of farms nearby. This obviously isn't something that I was able to study yet, but. And then what I was obviously trying to get at was the average phosphorus load for each tributary. So as I did before with the others, I multiplied it across, and that gave me micrograms per minute, and I converted that to grams per year. And the stream that I mentioned before that had the highest flow rate also has the highest phosphorus load, and that is mostly due to the fact that it has the highest flow rate, obviously. And something that I looked at was down here was where I mentioned where S9, the stream on the North Lake Road is that the stream travels really far up. So it's important to know that something as far up as like even where it says our farm could be something that is affecting a lake that is all the way south of here. The next step to this would obviously try to be to discover what is causing the higher phosphorus loads. I didn't have the time to get to any of this stuff, but to be able to discover where it's coming from, you could then try to reduce the phosphorus load. So say there is like a farm that is the reason why a particular stream has so much phosphorus loading into Caz Lake. They might be using like fertilizers excessively, like to a point that they don't need to be using, and they can reduce it. Or even having something like cattle like near a stream that shouldn't be, because then their waste could end up in the stream as well. And then even taking preventative measures, as I mentioned before, like knowing that a stream has a really high flow rate to prevent anything from being able to, anything toxic being able to get into the stream. And these are my excited and questions.